There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's ISE webinar. We're going to be talking to you about the future of future careers. Shall I hand over to you, Georgia? Do you want to kick us off and take it from here?
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the future of future talent or future careers, as Stephen just said. Great to see so many of you here today. We're going to be running through some of the macro trends that we think are influencing today's labour market and the future of our workforce, the skills we need, and the future jobs that are going to be needed. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking with you about kind of what you're already doing in this space. And we're also going to update you in terms of what we're doing within the ISE. We're going to leave some time at the end as well. So if you have any questions, please do start thinking about them, and we'll make sure there's plenty of time at the end for that as well. So Stephen, I'm going to hand to you if you want to take us through those macro trends.
Fantastic, will do. Thanks, Georgia. So for those that don't know me, name's Steve Isherwood, Joint Chief Exec of the ISE, responsible for sort of market knowledge, insights, and all that kind of stuff. And as Georgia said, we like to make these sessions as interactive as possible. So use the chat, use the Q&A, and then we'll come back to any questions on that that you might have for us. So I'm going to share just a few slides. We're not going to do death by PowerPoint today, but if I just share my screen, I just want to talk you through really some of the bigger challenges that we see out there in the market that we think are fundamentally changing the way that the early careers as a sector, as an industry, is going to change over the coming decade or so. I'm trying to do two things at once, which is always a disaster. So let me see if I can get this to slideshow. Hold on. This is where I've changed lap.
Oh, I think we might have lost you, Stephen. I think he was probably about to say that he's changed laptops and he's having a few challenges with the new laptop. We'll give him a second to see if we can get him back online. Otherwise, I will try and take over. So apologies for this, everyone. We will have Stephen hopefully back online very soon. The joys of technology, I'm sure we can all agree. It's always best laid plans. And then the technology will or won't work on the day. So please bear with us for a couple more minutes while we get Stephen back. Yes, Keith, absolutely. First mega trend, reliable technology. Here we are, fabulous. Welcome back, Stephen. We've just been talking about the first mega trend to be reliable technology. Oh, you're on mute.
On mute. That is the first time since before the pandemic that Zoom has crashed literally just as I was about to start. So really sorry. So I didn't hear anything that any of you have just been talking about. Shall I just carry on from where I was before?
We were literally just filling time so that we hoped you could get back on.
Jolly good. So sorry. So I don't know why I did that. Right. So I've got the PowerPoint slides back open. Let's share screen. Right. Let's go. All right, I'm not going to put it into presenter mode because that seems to be what caused a problem last time when I did that. It crashed. So so apologies if you can't quite see the slides perfectly to scale. But if you want a copy of the slides afterwards, just let me know and I'll send them through. So future early careers. Why is everything going to change? It's funny. I've written a blog that's out on the website today, and actually I was reminiscing about it used to be quite simple when we all worked in graduate recruitment, and that's the way it was described, and then that's morphed into early careers, future careers. About 3 people have phoned me up this year and said, what's everybody calling themselves now? Because the phrase early careers doesn't seem to fit what people are thinking about. So I'm just going to explore that for a few minutes now. Anybody that's heard me speak recently has heard me talk about population demographics, and I think these 2 graphs really bring to life the difference in demographics within Western developed countries like the UK. We used to have population pyramids. The graph on the right is India, and you can see that India is starting to change in terms of the number of births at the bottom. But there you still got a pyramid where there are many more people in earlier years in life than there are in the older age demographics. Whereas you look at the UK, it's not a population pyramid, it's more like Canary Wharf, one Canary Wharf. There are actually slightly smaller number of 15 to 20-year-olds, and they are 55 to 60-year-olds. And if we think about that in terms of people feeding the labour market, that means there isn't this big supply of younger people. There is a bit of a growth spurt in actual younger people coming through that kind of 18 age range at the moment, but that is going to start declining pretty soon. Last year there were 100,000 less births than there were 10 years ago, 2011. That's a significant proportion of the market when we think that there's roughly 600,000 or 700,000 sort of people in the average cohort size. So big changes in demographics. It's actually reducing the number of people that are in the labour markets. And I'll come back to why I think that UK population graph is actually a really good way of thinking about how labour markets may change in our space. So that's birth rates. I've also had a look at the forecast. This is to 2035 predictions that have been done by the ONS, Office for National Statistics, around actually what's liable to change in actual roles. What's the economy going to need in terms of a workforce? And this is the net change. So there'll be people obviously coming in and out of work, people retiring. So this is the net change in what those roles will be over the next 10 years. So the biggest increase is in professional occupations, an extra 1.6 million people are going to be required to be working in those professional occupations. Professional occupations, you can pretty much say shorthand for graduate level roles. That doesn't mean you have to be a graduate, but it's educated to that kind of skill level 6, 7, to use the terminology. When you get to less skilled roles, so that's the flatter bits of the bar, there are changes in that sector, but it's more about actually some sectors. So some of the trades, some areas, administrative, secretarial sounds an old-fashioned phrase, but those kind of occupations, there is going to be a decrease in their roles, but that's going to be an increase. There's going to be increases in the lower skilled sort of caring leisure sector. So that's more in the lower skilled areas. It's more about swapping. In the higher skilled area, which tends to be where our employers operate, actually a significant increase in the number of people that the economy will need. To give you an idea of linking demographic numbers to actual predicted job vacancies or job requirements, it's predicted there'll be roughly a need for 2.5 million extra people in these kind of skilled roles by 2035. But the population is only going to increase by about 1.5 million. So already there, you've got a shortfall of 1 million people to do the roles the economy is needed. So that's the demographics, that's the skills piece. Sorry, that's the demographics and that's the role piece. What does it mean in terms of skills? Because if you follow the conversation in the press, lots of talk around actually vocational versus academic routes. Are there enough skilled people in the UK? I won't really go into the detail of this graph. There's a link on the slide so you can have a look at it and play around with it yourself. But this is the OECD looking at actually the skills within the economy and where the shortage is, where there's oversupply and where there's undersupply. And this is comparing the UK to Germany. So the blue dots are the UK. So you can actually see that comparing to Germany, because the German labour market is much more structured than the UK, German apprenticeships, etc., etc. So in the UK, actually, there is an excess. If you look, we're more extreme. The blue dots are further apart than the orange dots. So that shows that actually there's a lot of people actually where there's this skills mismatch. So people do make reports. You will hear comments saying, well, actually, there's quite a few people in the UK that are overqualified for the roles they do. It's normally when people are arguing that there's too many graduates. But actually, when you look at the number of people that are underqualified, there are far many more people that are underqualified than overqualified. So again, that plays to the skills mismatch. We haven't got the balance right in the UK of actually where the economy, where employers need those skills, and that's only going to become exacerbated as those demographic changes kick in. So we think we're at the start of something here. I'm not coming to this saying that actually there's a whole bunch of solutions out there and this is what you need to do to deal with that, because I think we're at the start of the labour market changes, and we're already starting to see this play out in terms of increases in reneges, the number of unfilled vacancies, and just that challenge employers have right across the spectrum in terms of trying to adapt to those labour market changes. My argument is they're not here for the short term. It's not just something that's the result of the pandemic. When you look at the long-term data, these challenges are here to stay, which means that for early careers, there's a real opportunity for us to step up and help meet some of those challenges. And I've just picked on these three images in here to give you a kind of glimpse of some of the stuff that I think that is out there that's quite interesting and shows where you can see this direction of travel. There's quite a few employers that are looking at ex-military as sources of talent. The US has always been very good at this, but I'm starting to see more and more organisations in the UK looking at ex-military as a possible source of talent. People really ripe for either using the existing skills they've got or taking those transferable skills and retraining into different professions. There's Now Teach, which again I think is a really interesting concept, targeting people much later in their careers. People towards, hesitate to say the end of their career because that's probably a little bit too extreme, but actually people who want to do something different. They've had a professional career elsewhere. Really interesting, successful program. Now we might not have something quite the same in our industry, but those concepts I think are worth looking at. And it's worth having a visit to the Unilever Future of Work piece. It's very much driven by a positioning around ESG, CSR, but actually when you look at what's pulled into the future of work, there's a lot in there about actually just upskilling young people around the world. There's also some interesting stuff in there around how Unilever are offering opportunities to people within the organisation to go and do secondment project work in a field that's totally different to the area they work in at the moment. So that opportunity to expand, to reskill, to think of different things to do. And I think as employers, we're going to have to think a lot more about those kind of programs. So it's difficult to think what the terminology might be, hence the question where I started. People ask me, what should we call ourselves? But actually, early career, does that mean early in career? Does it first roll on a new pathway? Is it about transitions from some form of education into work in a different way, but not just about starting work either coming out of school or out of university? We think there's going to be a significant change, and early careers has a big role to play in that. Sorry again about the delay. We'll send those slides around to everybody who's joined in afterwards. Or if you've got any questions on that, please do pop them into the chat, and we'll come back to that towards the end of the session. Back to you, Georgia. Have we lost Georgia, Simon?
We lost Georgia. God.
We're having one of those days, aren't we? Well, you were going to go next, weren't you? So, do you want to do your slides next, and then we'll see if Georgia rejoins us? I know she had a couple of polls to do.
Yep, she did, and yeah, let's just be agile today. Talking about skills that we need for the future, right? Agile is definitely one of them. So. Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, so I'm Simon. I was on the board of the ISE from 2017 to 2020. and I had a specific brief, which was to develop the apprenticeship offer for ISE members. So lots of the apprenticeship outputs you now get from the ISE came about from the work that we did over those 3 years. Back end of last year, I was very kindly reapproached by Stephen to ask to get back involved with the ISE again and pick up some of that apprenticeship work that I've been had been done over those years. So I'm kind of come back to the ISE to move the apprenticeship work forward. My day job, I'm the Chief Progression Officer at Connector. So we're a technology business and we use technology to support underrepresented talent get into work and then support underrepresented talent progress when in work. Coming back to what we're doing now at the ISE when it comes to apprenticeships, one of the things that I did when I was on the board is I created a working group of members to work with me to bring to life the services that the ISE now provide to its members around apprenticeships. And it was a really successful approach, is having a working group. So I've done the same thing again, so having come back to this. We went out to the members to say, listen, do you want to get involved in a working group and move the work we've done so far on apprenticeships and take that forward? We had unbelievable levels of interest from the members about wanting to get involved in the working group. I was looking to create a working group of 10 people, and we had far in excess of that come forward. So on the back of the levels of interest that we've had from people to want to get involved in the working group, we have set up 4 subgroups. And Stephen, could you share the screen, please? And we can talk people through the 4 subgroups that we have, that we've created. So I think it's slide 5. There we go. Fantastic. Thank you. So what we've done is got 4 subgroups. You can see them there. So we've got one subgroup that's going to be looking specifically at apprentice recruitment. We've got another one which is going to be looking at development, another one strategy, and another one policy. So the recruitment one's going to be led by Georgia, who's obviously head of insights at the ISE. Development's going to be led by Jade. Jade's an ISE board member and works at Severn Trent. I'm going to be leading on the strategy piece, and then all of those 3 output, the work from all those 3 subgroups will then feed into a policy subgroup that Stephen will be leading on. So that's the 4 working groups that we've got that are going to be doing the work. The clue is in the name. It's a working group, and we're going to be looking at what needs to be done around those 3 areas to help organisations do more with apprenticeships. And really importantly, our brief as a working group is really broad. So it is not, as Stephen was alluded to earlier, it's not looking at apprenticeships purely through the school and college leaver route, but actually looking at all kinds of pools of talent. Because what is clear from what Stephen shared at the beginning is that we've got a real incredibly tight labour market here in the UK. We've got real skills challenges, and so more and more firms are starting to look at new pools of talent that they can either build or tap into to address this really tight labour market. So that's both looking at existing employees, and essentially one of the routes that firms can take is to enrol existing employees onto apprenticeships as part of this reskilling and upskilling piece, as well as other pools of new pools of talent that they might bring in, whether they're ex-military, as Stephen talked about, so firms who've signed up to the military covenant, for example, whether it's returners, whether it's with the big challenge we have in the UK around economic inactivity. There's obviously, you'll be aware, there's been a big push from government about the over 50s. And so looking at programs that might bring individuals who might have post-COVID retired early want to come back into the workplace in some way, shape or form. So really looking at what can be done. And funnily enough, with putting my connector hat on, one of our clients were creating about to launch a program, an over 50s program, looking to specifically target and bring over 50s from lower socioeconomic backgrounds into a broad range of roles within the organization, and creating a program to enable that to happen. So all kinds of, our brief is apprenticeships in its widest sense, not just from what we have done to date at the ISE, which is that from an early talent out of school and college perspective. In terms of the outputs that we're going to expect to see, all of it is going to be focused on enabling you as members to be able to do more when it comes to apprenticeship. So address some of the barriers that might exist, but also showcase best practice and new practice from organizations, particularly coming back to these new pools of talent that firms are can tap into. So as I say, the kind of outputs you can expect is lots of examples of best practice across recruitment, across development, and also signposting you to more and more best practice that you can find. One of the big areas we're obviously going to be looking at from a strategy point of view is the kind of ROI measures for apprenticeships. So, you know, how to build the business case to do more with apprenticeships within your organization, and then examples of new work being done on creating these new pools of talent. So all of these are all things that we're going to be delivering as outputs from the working group that you as ISE members will be able to benefit from. And just as a quick aside, I do have an ask already, which is that if there are these new talent, these new pools of talent programs that you're involved in as an organization, please do share them with us. We're really keen to get a sense of what's going on out there in the market, what firms are doing, albeit it might be still at the early stages of. So do share with us at the ISE anything that you are that you're doing. So just to wrap up, we have created a new working group. There are 4 subgroups focusing on those different areas, all looking to deliver lots of best practice tools, guides, insights to enable you as an organization to do more with apprenticeships. Whatever apprenticeships means for your organization, whether it's for new or existing, whether it's for those new pools of talent, that is what we are going to be delivering as outputs for you as members. So really help you address those skills challenges that Stephen's talked about, and also I know for a lot of you, getting more and more return on investment from your levy spend. So that's very much what we're going to be looking to do. So that's it for me. Georgia, you're back. Over to you.
Thank you. I am back, and I am so sorry, everyone, that macro trend of reliable technology somehow got to me as well. So my apologies to miss all of that great stuff from both Stephen and Simon. Thank you very much. So this part of the webinar, we'd actually like to get a little bit of a feel for what you're doing and whether this is kind of resonating for you or not. So we've prepared a couple of polls. The first one is about those types of talents. We're really curious to find out, are you actually already using this type of talent, or trying to attract this type of talent, or indeed even engaging with this type of alternative talent pools? So you hopefully see a brilliant poll on the screen. So when we talk about career changes, very similar to the Teach Now example that Stephen's given, ex-military as well, we've obviously talked about. Ex-offenders, I know some companies have looked at this in the past and maybe are looking at it again. Neurodiverse talent could well be a subsect of neurodiversity, or it could be more broadly trying to attract and engage with people with neurodiversity. over 50s, Simon's spoken about, and of course we had the last budget where they talked about a package of work under the banner of returnerships, which would include apprenticeships to try and attract over 50s back into work, being one of the largest demographics to have left the workforce since the pandemic. And when I say workforce returners, this is very much people who maybe have been on a break from the workforce, whether that be through caring and parental responsibilities, or indeed for other reasons of caring, or indeed other reasons where they couldn't actually participate in the workforce, but are now ready to return for whatever reason. And this is really interesting. We've got a lot of interest and engagement around neurodiversity. I'm going to now end the poll shortly so you can see the results. Okay, here we go. So the results, hopefully you can start seeing those on your screen now. So yes, a large proportion of people on the call already engaging with neurodiverse talent, which is excellent to see. Similarly, career changes, nearly 50% of you are engaged with some form of career changer program. Ex-military and possibly unsurprisingly, but ex-offenders and the over 50s being less targeted talent pools right now. But again, as Simon and Stephen have been saying, we could well see more impetus and more interest in some of these alternative talent pools as being excellent opportunities for us to increase the diversity as well as increasing the talent within our organisations. So thank you for sharing what you're actively engaged in. And we had another question, which was, have we missed anyone? Are there any talent pools that you're currently actively targeting who speak to this idea of potential, who speak to this idea of joining your organisation to help you with reskilling or new skills development to achieve your requirements within your organisations? And if you just want to pop anything in the chat, if you have any other groups of talent that we haven't thought about yet or we haven't talked about yet, really curious to see if anyone's working with any other demographics that we've maybe not thought about yet. So while people maybe have a think about that, the other side of obviously these types of talent pools where we are looking at potential is the skills development. And as Simon and Stephen have both said, obviously apprenticeships are one way to develop talent. They're also a way where we can look at supporting existing talent within organisations. And Dan, thank you so much for your comment there. Apprenticeship completers can find themselves in limbo. Yeah, being non-grads and not experienced enough. That's a really interesting comment, Dan. Thank you. And I think that's right. And one of the things we just also wanted to explore with people on the call today is how are people using their apprenticeships? Are they using them to support the onward development of existing colleagues, or are they actually mainly focused on the new hires to bring in new talent to train and develop through the apprenticeships? So I'm just going to launch another quick poll where I'd love to get your thoughts on whether or not you see your apprenticeships being used in different ways within the organisation at the moment. So keen to hear, are you using them predominantly to develop new skills? Are you using them to upskill or reskill existing employees? I know some people are using apprenticeships for leadership development, including MBAs. Or are you maybe using your apprenticeships for diversity programs like Women in Leadership? And I do appreciate that there will be people on the call today who maybe aren't using apprenticeships at all in their organisations. So again, just really keen to see how people are using this opportunity as a vehicle to develop skills and upskilling and reskilling. Jane, you say you can't see the poll. Okay, let me try and relaunch that. Bear with me one moment. Okay, here we go. Can people see this now? I fear the
Yes.
gremlins of technology are not in my favor today. I'm really sorry about that. Ah, here we go. Yes, I can see all the results coming in. Fabulous. So I'll give it a couple of seconds while we let everyone have a chance to let us know how they're using apprenticeships or not in their current organisations. Okay, so I think we're stabilizing on our results, so I will now end the poll and I will show you the results. Hopefully you can see those on the screen now. So possibly unsurprisingly, most people, 67%, are using apprenticeships to develop new hires joining the organisation. 50%, half of you are using the apprenticeships as a vehicle to upskill or reskill existing employees, and about a quarter of you using them for leadership development, which is really interesting. A small proportion using apprenticeships as a way to develop diversity and offer diversity programs within your organisations, and nearly a third of you, 28%, actually not using apprenticeships at all at the moment, which I think is probably similar to the results that we've seen in other surveys when we've spoken to members. But great to see that there's a real blend and mix of ways that people are using the apprenticeships as a vehicle to support development of skills, upskilling and reskilling, which is absolutely great to see. So I'm going to stop the polls there. I'm just going to check the chat if anybody's mentioned any other types of talent that we haven't spoken about. I think maybe we did capture the breadth of the ways that there are new and alternative talent pools emerging for us to be able to tap into. So,
I think it's kind of just I was going to add a thought there, Georgia. It prompted me to a conversation that I had a little while ago, and that was around, we were having a conversation with a group of early careers leaders saying that there's probably lots of individual little projects happening, which is why I put that slide up. But very few organisations are thinking about it in a broad, strategic way, because some of the other kind of programs that I've heard of, for example, organisations that were going to make a group of people redundant because their roles were just, in a sense, had been outdone by technology, but actually giving people the opportunity you think might not be coders, retraining to become coders, and that working. People returning to work from after having children, coming into very different roles and different shapes of roles. So my sense is there's quite a lot of individual programs out there, but actually are we really thinking about this in some sort of joined up systemic way? And I suspect not at the moment.
I think that's a really interesting point, Stephen, and I wonder if anyone else out there on the webinar today has the same feeling. It certainly feels to me like that's very much the case, but as we can see from the data and the trends, we will see more requirements to be able to engage with this. Ways of tackling the challenges and the disparity between the supply and demand of what we'll need in the UK in terms of labour markets and workforce demographics. So I can't see any other areas that we've missed, which is great. And what does this feel like to everyone? We'd be really keen to hear your thoughts. Does this resonate? And maybe it is starting in very small, embryonic ways, as Stephen said. It might be an initiative here or a pilot there. But how are people feeling about the need to think about talent in alternative ways? And how your organisations might be involved already in thinking about that? And I can see we've got a good conversation in the chat going about apprenticeships as well, which is excellent. And again, this is, as Simon says, one of the reasons that we've wanted to focus on the apprenticeships and apprentices, is that we know that there are many challenges that people are facing. As our poll just showed, most people are using apprenticeships to bring in and develop new skills, new hires with new skills, and that can challenge the way that organisations are set up. And where those apprentices go is definitely one of the things that I know the development subgroup is going to be looking at, in terms of how we can help organisations in the membership think about how to best connect and not lose the talent that they're investing in through these apprenticeships, and enable them those stepping stones to continue to move forward within the organisation. We know from our latest development survey that we do see that apprentices tend to stay longer than graduates within employers. Now, obviously, often apprenticeships are a longer training program than a graduate program might be. But even beyond that, the level of retention at the 5-year mark is significantly different for apprentices. So there may be some structural issues that our subgroup will be able to help with in terms of developing that talent even further within the organisation. But I think it's a really great signal that when apprentices do come and they can be supported in developing a career within an organisation, they really do stick around to give it their best shot, and they do really want to stay and continue to develop their careers with that organisation. So I'm gonna ask another question, which is, what do people think about the way that apprenticeships are being used? So we've talked a lot about new hires, and we can see that that's how the majority of people are using apprenticeships. But do people see a space for using apprenticeships as a tool to develop alternative talent in alternative ways? And I can start to see some other questions and comments coming in. So maybe we'll flick to talking a little bit about what's happening in the chat, and we'll also open up for Q&A. So any questions that you have for any of us on the call, please do let us know. I can see we've got one question submitted from Keith, and apologies if this one was covered while my internet was deciding to not work. But we've got a question here about the Unilever example, Stephen, that you gave on future of work. And the question is, how best can the early careers community better partner with universities, schools and colleges to help students bring the future forward so they understand and develop the skills for the future? Great question there, I think.
I think it's a real, I think it goes to the heart, actually, that question, in terms of a lot of the things that we talk about at a kind of a very very pragmatic level. What do we do? But also, I think it is the kind of question that when you get behind the politics is trying to understand what should we do with our education system. Because I do think one of the challenges is that actually those skills for the future are very difficult to predict. And actually, there's a very strong argument, if you look at more of the OECD work, actually the kind of skills that people need are the ability to be flexible, the ability to be fungible, the ability to kind of deal with very different situations. So, and a lot gets said about the difference between Germany and the UK, but they are very fundamentally different labour markets. Germany is much more structured. People make career decisions much earlier. You get on a very set pathway. And it's interesting, there is an argument that actually in the future that might cease to be a good model, because actually it's harder to be as flexible when you've got that kind of structure in place. So I think it's this live debate, and I'm not pretending to have anything like the answers, but it's that real challenge between actually how much structure do you want in place, but how much do you actually just want to build in flexibility and give people actually those kind of, let's call them meta skills, to be able to deal with the world as it is 5, 10, 20 years from now. And I think it's quite difficult. But what I think will help, and pragmatic answer to Keith's question is actually just more practical ways for employers to engage with the world of work. I think one of the problems with the UK when you compare us to other countries is that disconnect from school age from the world of work, whereas in other countries it's much stronger. So that kind of default of, kind of gets university, and that's when you really start to think about career. That's why UK universities' career services are much more strongly funded than they are elsewhere around the world. So that's a bit of a philosophical answer, I suspect, but I think that's part of what we need to get to. It's really understanding what are those solutions that do mean that people are in the right place for adapting with that world of work as it changes over the coming decades.
Thanks, Stephen. And there's another one here from Sarah. She's talking about wages being a challenge for career changes, coming with financial commitments compared to obviously different opportunities for career progression. Simon, I don't know if you want to maybe make a comment or two on that. She's also talking about locational challenges as well.
Yeah, that wages one's a really important point, Sarah, for career changes. And actually, you may be aware of it, and others on this call may be aware of it, but the Social Mobility Commission created a little while ago a really good apprenticeship toolkit. And that's one of the things it talks about is the importance of, when you're talking about career changes, the salary that you pay. So there is in part an answer, but there's definitely support in the Social Mobility Commission Apprenticeship Toolkit to this and to a number of other, how you address some of the other challenges that exist when it comes to creating these new programs. And it sort of, to your point, Catherine, that you made again around some of the challenges to making those happen, both either from a business perspective or from a candidate perspective. I say that the Social Mobility Commission has done some good work in their apprenticeship toolkit, so I would encourage people to have a look at that because there's some good stuff in there for sure.
I also think, Georgia, the cost of retraining is something we don't talk about enough. For those of you who've been following the introduction of the lifelong learning entitlement that's working its way through the sort of the political system, I think that's a very interesting concept because it gives people the ability to think about how they might use funding for their education throughout their life. So you may do 1 year of kind of foundation degree level at 18, 19, then go to work and do a bit later. So I think that's quite interesting, but I think there's something that is not talked about, which is the cost. Again, it's salary if your career changing, but also when you look at the cost of many courses, I think they just put an awful lot of people off. There's something about, I'm showing my age a little bit, but I remember my dad doing an open university course. I remember uncles, doing part-time courses at night school to learn accountancy for the businesses, all that kind of stuff. That capability is there, but it strikes me as the cost of doing that, if it's not being paid by your employer, and the lifelong turning lifetime doesn't get around that. And we talk about the amount of debt people are being expected to take on. So I think it's not just wages. I think it's the cost of accessing retraining, education at different stages in life. I think that's a barrier and puts a lot of people off as well.
Thanks, Stephen. And I think that is absolutely another key point. And there's another comment here from Catherine around the ability to predict what skills are going to be needed. And of course, that ties hand in hand with what skills people are going to either invest for themselves to develop in, or indeed employers are going to need to help develop the skills from within to enable them to meet those requirements. And yes, workforce planning as well, obviously a big challenge for a number of organisations, particularly with the pace of change within technology, automation, and generally the way and the world of work. So I think we might have another question here, and again I think it might be coming to you, Simon. So question about wondering how the over 50s would feel about being called apprentices. Are there challenges that we might see in terms of the balance between acknowledging their experience and welcoming them into a new sector? Great question.
Yes, thank you. And there's a number of answers to that question. And I know I've had conversations with other organisations who have that issue with grads that they enrol on apprenticeships when they land within the organisation. I have a personal view, which is that it's important, I think, to use the word apprenticeships, because that's one of the ways that we will strengthen its brand. Part of the reason why I think there's a concern about apprenticeships is it's still seen as something just for young people. It's still for lower level roles, all those kinds of things. So if we start calling it something else, there's a risk that that brand perception will continue. So as I say, from a personal perspective, I think it is important that we continue to use the word apprenticeships, because that's actually one of the, I think, most effective ways that we will stop that question coming up, and actually it'll be seen as something that people are proud to have done and to be proud to be seen as an apprentice. But that's only going to come from sticking with it. So I do understand the challenge with it, and I think, like all things, it's an education piece and it's a communication piece that needs to be done, and not just for the over 50s, I'll be honest, right across the board. We know we still have an issue with it in the school and college space around how apprenticeships are perceived, and even an awareness that there are such things as degree apprenticeships. So I think, yeah, there is definitely work to do. It is clearly a barrier, but as I say, from a personal perspective, my view is we should stick with it, because that's the only way actually we'll get to a place where people are, whoever they are, whatever point in their life they're at, they are proud that they have completed an apprenticeship.
Just to add to that, Georgia, that's why I use Now Teach as an example, because that is really targeting the over 50s. Yes, it's maybe not be directly applicable to other industries, but it's interesting as a concept, and it shows what can be done if you think about different age ranges and different ways of doing things. That's why I keep going back to that population that looks like that, because people need to weave in and out rather than thinking in pyramidal structures when it comes to their career. So I think, yes, Now Teach might be, something very specific to the teaching sector, but there must be versions of that apply to those age groups in different sectors.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Fiona, who's be delighted to be called an apprentice in the future, and would be interested in retraining. That is the lifelong learning and the mindset that we all need to take to go forward is very much one of trying, as Simon says, to support the concept of being proud, to be investing in ourselves, invested in by our organisations, to be able to train and upskill and reskill into the future requirements for ourselves and for the organisations.
Shall I make a comment on Keith's question?
I was just about to go there.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you and Simon might in a bit more detail. I was going to give my little take on it, which is that I absolutely get why employers and why we do need more flexibility in the levy, but I do kind of slightly, I guess, for once, want to put the government's case. Pre-apprentice levy, when it was a lot less regulated, there were some quite dodgy apprentice programs out there. So I do think there's a little bit of, we've got to be wary of the need for regulation and control to do all the things that we want to with apprenticeship, which is to have rigor, have really good training programs, well respected. There's a level of governance that's needed to achieve that, and I do think that's one of the things that the government is maybe balancing a little bit, which is, yeah, how do you have flexibility without going back to people scamming the system, basically. But I don't know, Simon or Georgia, if you have a view on that as well.
I mean, I agree, and I think it also comes back to Simon's point about being able to be proud to say that you've achieved an apprenticeship, and I think that is harder when the quality standards aren't as clear to the wider population as they might be when you know that it's a well-regulated and well established quality assessment and assurance of those qualifications.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I was pleased that we moved from frameworks to standards, right? And we introduced trailblazers, and all the things that we did is really important as part of that reset of apprenticeships. But as I say, it's a journey. Apprenticeships, particularly higher and degree level apprenticeships, are still pretty new. So it's definitely a journey that we are on. That's one of the many reasons why, with the work that we're doing here at the ISE and the working groups and the subgroups that we've set up, is all about looking at these issues. What are these barriers? What are the things that's making it tougher for you as an organization, either internally or externally, to do more with apprenticeships? That's what we want to understand, and that's what we want to play our part in driving it forward. And I'll probably wrap up there, Georgia.
Great, thank you, Simon. So we've got a couple more moments if anybody does have any other burning questions or comments they'd like to share from today's session. Obviously, we've covered a lot of ground, and there's as Simon says and as Stephen said, there's a lot more that we want to support our members with, both on the apprenticeships but also more broadly in terms of these changing demographics and how the future of work and the future of talent is going to look different in the future. So if anyone has any comments or any immediate thoughts in terms of what you'd like to see more from us regarding all of this, please do let us know, either in the chat now, or you can share your ideas with us after today's event. But we really would love to hear from you, because as the chat has shown and as the polls have shown, there's a lot of opportunity here, but there's also a lot of challenges and complexity. But together, I think we have a real opportunity to rebrand and support the apprenticeship space in terms of being seen as a real badge of honour at any age, in any sector and industry, and also to think about how these alternative talent pools, these communities of talent who could be brilliant for your organisation, can be supported to enter and to train and upskill, reskill, and transition into a new career with you in the future. So we're really keen to keep this conversation going. There'll be more to come. We obviously have the apprenticeship working group at the recruitment conference in June. We will also be doing a session that follows up from today. So again, if you're going to be there, or if you plan to be there and haven't got your tickets, please do so. The early bird discount, I believe, finishes at the end of this month, so a little bit of time to take advantage of that. The schedule is out, the agenda is pretty set, and it looks to be an amazing set of sessions over 2 days in Manchester. So please do join us there if you can, and we will be doing a follow-up session there on the first day as well, regarding all of the things we've talked about today and more. So please do keep in touch. Please do let us know of your thoughts, your ideas, where we can help. And we really hope to be able to keep this conversation live and progressing in the near future. Any final comments, Stephen, that you'd like to offer? You're on mute again.
That's me, not the technology. So I'm doing my own stupidity for that. Yeah, I think that there's a level of technical stuff, the apprenticeships, that we're going to do more on, but I think it is also actually that much broader strategic stuff that we definitely want to do a lot more work on too. I think particularly that is, what is the future of early careers? Is it future talent? Is it hiring for potential? We haven't even got the language right yet to talk about it. So I think so it'd be really interesting to have conversations around what's happening at board level? Do people have the time to think about this? I've tested this out with one or two contacts of mine in the HRD space, and they said, yeah, we actually know this is a problem. We just haven't got the time to do anything about it, that age-old thing with the workforce planning. So yeah, really just encouraging people joining the conversation. Any examples? Did you want to kick this around? Then please do get in touch. I think it's going to be very much an evolving thing over the next next few years.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Simon, as well. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's event. And we really look forward to continuing the conversation. Have a great afternoon. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Take care, everyone. Bye now.